Hi everyone, I'm going to show you an app called ArtSteps. I'm just working on sharing my screen here. I'm going to start with sharing on my school website the exhibit that I made with the app ArtSteps last school year to showcase student work in digital learning at the end of the year. So what I've done is I've hung up their work in a 3D space, and it is a VR experience, but you don't need goggles or anything. But if I look at these footsteps on the ground here that I'm moving around with my mouse, I can click once on the ground and sort of switch to using my arrow keys. This was a really nice option for teachers to have in their classrooms last school year at the end of the year for that open house. What they did was they just projected this onto their screen and they sort of moved in front of their class's work. So for example, the primary wing is over here. And so what the teachers did is they said, where is my class? I'm going to explore this. My class is right here. I'm going to highlight their work on the board from digital learning. And this was a really great way to include the community. I don't have my own classroom for digital learning. I teach on a cart, so I asked the librarian if I could borrow her projector board in the library, and so I was sort of there greeting parents, and students could pan around the museum and walk around virtually. So that was a nice option, and it's a space saver, which is really great. So I'm going to briefly take you through how to use ArtSteps, and I'm going to start with an untitled new exhibit. What I've done here is I've just clicked on one of these free spaces. There are 4 free spaces for you to play around with. I really liked the contemporary venue space. There are premium spaces, but they obviously cost money, so I stuck with a free space. You can also build your own, but that's a little overwhelming at first, especially if you're not used to working with 3D builder tools. So here we are, and now I'm going to follow these steps up here, and I'm going to skip design your space. That's not an option because I've used a template. I'm going to add and place my artifacts now. You can see that I have a whole file folder of storage from last year's gallery. And I have 68 images, 7 videos, and 18 text boxes that I've included in my space from last school year, but this is a new one. So here we are. I want to orient you to this toolbar at the top here. Right now I'm in the orbit camera mode, and I'm going to switch to first person camera because I'm placing artifacts on the wall, and that gives me more control of the space. I have hung one artifact successfully over here. I'm going to try to hang one right next to that. And if I click add image, this is pretty typical for adding an image in any app, but I can drag and drop, or I can click and choose an image from my computer. The images do have to be downloaded from whatever app your students are using or you're using. It has to be stored on a local device or your computer. It can't be on a cloud storage. So that's the downside, I would say, of this app, is you have to download everything and then upload everything again. So the title could go here. It could be anything that you want. You could add a description. I would recommend to click off of interactive because you don't necessarily need all that clicking through. And then you're good there. Licenses, I would recommend non-commercial. And it's important because of copyright licenses for artifacts that students have. I will also note that because this is a public app, I only included students' first names when I displayed their artwork. So that's also to protect some of their privacy there. So here we are. I'm going to add an image that I actually already have in my gallery. I'm going to click here, and you might notice a couple of strange things. I could place that on this wall over here, or I could place it right next to this butterfly here. I'm going to click once, and here I can add a title, as I said before. Right now I'm seeing 3 tools popping out on the image, and so these tools actually will scale this back and forward, and this changes the scale as well. And up here on this toolbar, I see a scale tool. Right next to that, there's a rotation tool. And directly next to that is a move tool. Most of the time, you'll just use the move and the scale tools when you're placing work. This blue one on the move tool actually moves the image off of the wall completely. So I recommend sticking with the red and the green. Lastly, I'll add a frame, which is right here. And I will, in my first person view, I'll take a step back and look at what I've done. And those look pretty good. So I'm going to move on and continue placing work. Once I've done that, I can plan a guided tour if I want to, and I can submit. Now you can add a cover photo. This sort of acts as a YouTube thumbnail, for example. So my exhibit from last year had this cover photo, and it just sort of makes it pop. You don't really need to do that part. But I sort of did that for the app itself so that people would know what they were looking at. Otherwise, you just get the general ArtSteps template photo. And I did make this cover photo using Canva. One quick note is I found it easier to stitch together whole entire classes of work. I did this using Google Drawings personally. You can also use another presentation tool. And I do recommend looking at your page setup and looking at how large your canvases are when you're assigning work or building work for your students. That does impact the resolution of your photos. But other than that, this app was amazingly easy to use once I figured out this toolbar at the top that I was showing you with moving and rotating, and that was the hardest part, was figuring out how do I make my image larger. And I do recommend this. I know that it's a lot of work on the part of the teacher, but it ends up being a really amazing artifact for your students, and it's an exhibit that you don't really ever have to take down. And again, your students will be really impressed with this, families will be able to share it with each other, and that's the benefit of using a digital space. So I hope that you can make use of this tool for something amazing in the future. You can add audio in the background, and I'll include other tutorial links that ArtSteps has created. They're pretty good. So thank you for watching, and I hope that this